Hey, third grade art friends, it's Mrs. Herbay. Um, Welcome back to another week of art. I hope that last week you were able to practice drawing birds and then that you were able to draw a bird that you liked onto your watercolor paper. And the watercolor paper is this paper that I gave you that is kind of stiff and it has a little bit of texture on it. Now I want to introduce you guys to watercolor. Watercolor is done by using watercolor paints, and so you're going to need a cup of water. I also like to have a paper towel on hand, and then you're going to need a brush. And typically you want a brush that's not super wide. This brush, something that looks similar to this, or if not, whatever you possibly have on hand that you can use. If you don't have a proper type of brush, you can always ask me and I can send one home for you or that you can pick up. So what we're going to do today is we are going to think about watercoloring the background of our bird drawing. So we are not at all going to work on our bird or the branch or whatever you drew that it is standing on or sitting on. And the reason is because we don't want the watercolor paint to run. That's one of the issues that a lot of people have with watercolor paint, is that they might use too much water, the colors all run together. And so what I thought we would do today is we would have like a nice easy introduction to watercolor by just doing the background, and you're going to be able to see how really the watercolor only spreads where the paper is wet. So we're going to be able to paint all around this bird without any of the background paint getting onto the bird. Now, another thing that we're going to think about is our bird is going to have lots of detail, and our bird is going to be the focal point of our painting. The background is kind of secondary. And so when we create our background is going to be somewhat not as detailed, more blurry, colors kind of blending together, okay? Now, the reference picture that I used last week to draw my bird, this tufted titmouse, the background is primarily green, which means my bird, there's probably like grass in the background and whatnot. Now you can think about where you want the background of your bird to be, and it doesn't necessarily have to be all one color. Like maybe my bird is in some trees, so I'm going to have some greens and then maybe some blue with sky showing through. Maybe I'll have an occasional brown branch that's sort of in the background. So I'm going to kind of show you how to go about that. And the first thing that I want to do is if I want the colors, the watercolors to kind of bleed or blend together, what I want to do is I want to sort of moisten my watercolor paper. Not the whole thing, but I'm just going to, up here at the top, I just kind of took my brush and I painted a little strip of water up here. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to wet my watercolor paint, and I'm going to put it on here. And as you can see, as I paint it, the paint is starting to kind of bleed out and mix because the paper is wet. Now, I don't want to get it too wet everywhere. And you can see then as I'm painting this, it's getting a little bit lighter. If I would like the color to be darker, I'm going to add more paint, but without as much water. I can also mix colors. So for example, I got some light blue up here, which is a little bit of a different color than the dark blue, and you can kind of see that. And again, like we talked about, if let's say right around in here, I wanted to kind of have some green, I'm going to wet this a little bit, and it's still a little bit blue, but that's okay. And then I'm going to kind of wet my green, and then as I paint my green in here, you're going to see how it kind of bleeds together. And maybe I want, now when you switch colors, you need to rinse your brush. I'm going to dry it off just a little bit. In this particular watercolor palette, I have some lighter colors. So I'm going to mix some lighter green in there. I'm going to wet the paper a little bit again. And then maybe I want a little bit of more green over here. So I'm going to kind of put that like that. Now around my bird here, I'm going to just kind of outline around this pencil line right here. And then I'm going to take some paint, and you're going to see that as long as there's no water, that paint is not going to go into where the bird is. So I'm going to, again, just paint around there, and then I want to get a little more paint on my brush. Oops, I just painted a little bit in there. But you can see if there's not water, the paint will not spread. So I got that. And then I'm just going to continue. Let's say, I'm going to rinse my brush. Let's say I wanted a little bit of sunlight up in here. I can paint a little bit of yellow in there. Kind of like that. And then I'm going to use, there's another color of green. I'm going to kind of wet this in here. And then I'm going to keep painting my blue. And again, I'm going to just outline along the bird there, because I don't want any watercolor to go into where the bird is. So you can kind of see I'm using my blues and my greens. It's kind of looking like there is a little bit of trees over in here. And I'm using some of my light blue. some more green over here. So you can kind of see how I'm going. I'm going to keep going, and you can follow along. I'm going to speed it up to do like a little bit of a faster time lapse. And then once I get my watercolor background in, I'll explain to you just a little bit more. All right, guys, now I have the whole background filled in, and hopefully you got to watch the time lapse of that. Now, once this dries, I can go back and I could add a few more details. Or let's say I had some colors like here that got a little bit washed out. So in that case, I would use a little more paint and a little less water if I wanted to make that color, sort of that purpley color that I had sort of up in there, a little more vibrant. And now that the paper's not so wet, it's not spreading quite as much. If I wanted that to be a little bit like of a sunset-y kind of color, and I'm just going back in. And just making those colors a little more vibrant. Let's say I wanted to have that those were tree trunks, right? So if I wanted it to look a little more blurry, I would just have it be kind of, I would paint some water there, and then I would just add a little bit of paint like that. And then I'm just going to notice how the paint doesn't go on the bird or on the branch because I did not put any water there. All right, and so you can see I was able to add that. And if I wanted to go back and add any more, let's say a little bit highlights of color or whatnot, I could go back once it's dry and I can add a few more details. These are kind of the trees that I was And then last but not least, I just wanted to show you a really fun kind of trick if you're interested in this. Let's say you wanted to show clouds. What you can do is you can take your brush, make sure it doesn't have any paint on it, and let's say I just want a cloud kind of in this area, so I'm just kind of painting with my brush, and then I'm wetting it, and then I'm taking my paper towel and I'm dabbing it, and you can see the paint is starting to kind of come up in that area. Might have to dab it again. But then see how you see there's kind of like some white showing. I'm gonna dab it one more time. And then you can kind of see there's like a cloud there. And maybe I want to do a little more right in here. I'm going to take my towel. That one you can see a little bit better. Take my towel. Yeah, so there you go. And once you finish your background, that is all that we are going to do for this week. And then we're going to let it dry. And then next week, we're going to talk about finishing up our bird. I'll look forward to seeing you guys this week on Friday.